Young voices ignored.
He'd tell me to lay down on the floor and I told him I didn't want to. And he said, well, I've got to.
Children targeted, groomed and sexually exploited by older men.
It needs to stop. Children are getting hurt. Children are getting abused.
3 key warnings dismissed. Those who made them speak out.
And one of the things that kept coming back was, where's your evidence? And I was thinking, isn't that your job to collect evidence?
And disturbing findings suppressed.
I was subjected to the most intense personal hostility. I've never seen back covering like it.
The abusers who remain free. We identify one of them.
I don't understand why my life's been affected and his hasn't.
The police and council in Rotherham finally called to account for failing children.
They were raped by multiple perpetrators. They were trafficked to other towns and cities in the north of England. They were abducted, beaten and intimidated.
Tonight, Panorama investigates the scandal that has devastated the lives of more than 1,400 children in just one town. This is a story of stolen childhoods, of abuse dismissed and ignored for years. Each time Emma Jackson tells professionals about what happened, she wants to open eyes, so those at risk today are protected.
I was a child and I didn't know what I was involved in or what I was doing or what risks that I was taking.
We're protecting Emma's identity and that of most of the girls and their families who've talked to us about sexual exploitation.
I would get picked up, I'd go into town, and people would pull up in cars and I'd have to have sex with them or whatever they wanted, and then they'd drop me back off, and then another might come. That was my life.
That was 11 years ago. She did try to tell the police what had happened to her. She was just 13, confused and vulnerable.
Me and you were pushing my head on the floor and that, and grabbing my neck and stuff and pulling me by my hair. I were saying that I didn't want to do it and stuff, and he said, of course you want to do it, and that he don't like girls saying that no to him, and he don't accept it when they say no.
She describes being abused by one man with his friends watching, egging him on.
He said that I were a white bitch and he'd had enough of me and he punched me in the mouth. And then he said if I opened my mouth again he'd do it harder.
Emma was just one of at least 1,400 children groomed and targeted for sex by older men, here in the South Yorkshire town of Rotherham.
I was just going on a weekend with my friends and I started talking to some young boys and I built a friendship with them. And then as time went on, they started to introduce older people and they just seemed to get older and older.
She was being groomed. The child psychiatrist who treated Emma says it was like brainwashing.
She was totally enthralled to those people. They had her under their thumbs, absolutely enslaving her to do everything that they wanted.
For the first time, Emma was keeping secrets from her parents. She was soon out of her depth.
I wasn't mature enough to think about sex or anything like that.
And one evening, she was singled out.
We went up to the outdoor market stalls and then my main perpetrator took me away from my friend and the other man, and the next thing I knew, he was raping me.
In Rotherham, the exploitation of young girls by older men was first talked about in the 1990s. Back then, this abuse was labelled child prostitution. A youth organisation was set up by the council. It was called Risky Business. It became a place where victims felt listened to. They described their experiences to a researcher involved in a Home Office project. She's asked not to be identified.
The workers in that project were the only people that those young people trusted, that were telling the complete story to. And some of the stories that I heard very early on were just so graphic that I don't think I will ever forget them.
We've spoken to nearly 20 families where children have been exploited. Their stories are shocking, often violent. Here in Clifton Park, girls describe being forced to go from abuser to abuser. Others talk about being trafficked to places like Manchester, Bradford and Bristol to have sex with strangers. Most, though not all, of the girls asking for help were white. For many years, risky business passed vital intelligence about their abusers to the police and social services. Among the men named was Arshid Hussain, known as Ash or Mad Ash. He has convictions for violence and intimidation. In 1999, he was targeting a girl who we're calling Isabel.
I just turned 14. He was very polite, he had good manners. He was very kind to me and my friends.
And what did you know about him?
He was into some things that he shouldn't be.
What do you mean by that?
That he was into drugs and violence.
He drove flash cars and dressed smartly, had a wife and children at home, and was 24 when he began to abuse 14-year-old Isabel.
My mum and dad were trying to stop things. My parents went to his house, to the police, to the authorities, and he just continued it.
They must have been desperate.
The authorities said because I was consenting to it, there was nothing that they could do.
Even though you were 14 years old?
Yeah.
Over the next 2 years, she became pregnant twice, once whilst in the council's care. Social workers often referred to Arshid Hussain as her boyfriend, even though they viewed him as dangerous. When
I was pregnant, they had concerns for the baby because they said that he was a violent man. So if, you know, a baby shouldn't be around a man like that, then why was I allowed to be around a man like that?
Because you were still a child.
Yeah.
Information gathered by the Home Office researcher showed Isabel was one of 18 girls who described Arshid Hussain as their boyfriend. All were said to be under 16. In 2002, the researcher identified nearly 270 girls in Rotherham being exploited by a number of men.
I was collecting data on who the perpetrators were, what cars they were using, their grooming methods, their offending methods. And what I was also collecting was information on professional responses.
One of the cases she examined was Isabel's. She was going missing for weeks, sometimes months. And once, when police raided a house she was hiding in, they found Arshid Hussain.
Me and him was upstairs in a bedroom and we was being intimate when the police raided it. They would have seen me with just some pants on, run under the bed, and they would have seen him pulling some joggy bottoms up and heading towards the corner of the room.
Would it have been obvious what had been going on?
Yeah. That was the first time I ever saw him scared, and I think he honestly thought, this is it, I'm going to get arrested.
Now 15, it was Isabel who was arrested, not Arshid Hussain.
I was given a truncheon by him, and he told me to save it. So I was arrested for having a dangerous weapon.
What happened to him?
Well, nothing, he just went about his daily business.
This man has been having sex with this underage girl. That's a case that should be prosecuted. I don't understand why the police or social services took it upon themselves to excuse that behaviour.
And Isabel says Arshid Hussain was stopped by police on many occasions, with her next to him.
Even if, you know, the police was kind of looking for him for something, he'd be able to turn around, and which he did plenty of times, and say, I'll play the race card, so they let me off.
250,000 people live in Rotherham. While most are white, about 8% come from different ethnic backgrounds, and there's a well-established Pakistani heritage population. When the Home Office researcher began to share her findings with the council, she told them most of the perpetrators being named were from that community. She was taken aback by the response from one official.
She said, "You must never refer to that again. You must never refer to Asian men." And her other response was to book me on a 2-day ethnicity and diversity course to raise my awareness of ethnic issues.
In 2002, the draft of her final report was sent to the Home Office and the Council on a Friday. She says that weekend, the risky business office had unwanted visitors who let themselves in.
They'd gained access to the office and they had taken my data. So out of the number of filing cabinets, there was one drawer emptied, and it was emptied of my data.
Who do you think would have done that?
It had to be an employee of the council.
Rotherham Council says it's unable to find anyone who recognises this series of events. The researcher then came under pressure to change her findings. She wouldn't.
This report, written more than a decade ago, was given to both the council and the police. It clearly should have led to action. But here it says responsibility was continuously placed on young people's shoulders rather than with the suspected abusers. And when the issues were raised with senior officials, the response was defensiveness and hostility.
Her report was never published, and the council even tried unsuccessfully to sack her.
I was subjected to the most intense personal hostility. There were threats made from a range of sources. I've never seen back covering like it, and I still feel extremely angry about that.
The response, in a nutshell, was that she was punished for speaking truth to power.
Alexis J. carried out the independent review that last week revealed the damage done by not tackling exploitation in Rotherham.
If they had taken account of the content and been less concerned with their own images, then a great deal more might have been done at an earlier stage.
There would soon be more warnings. In the meantime, the abuse continued. In 2003, it was 13-year-old Emma who was being abused.
They started to just use me more and more. And I was just seen as trash, really.
Emma's mother knew something was wrong when neighbours told her they'd seen 2 men hanging around the house. She asked her daughter about it when she got home from school.
That's when she just broke down and just kept saying, "They're raping me, they're raping me." I just couldn't believe it, and my reaction, I rang 999. It was just devastating. And the sergeant came into me and he said, "Do you realise who your daughter has got involved with? We can't deal with it, we'll have to get the serious crime squad."
Emma was able to provide detectives with important evidence.
He made me take my coat off and lay it on the floor, and then he told me to lay down on the floor, and I told him I didn't want to.
She'd hidden the clothes she was wearing on the different occasions when she was raped. She gave them to the police.
She didn't want me to see them, she hid them. And she went and got them out, and there were like 6 bags of clothes. There was a cream coat that got blood all over it, and they took all these clothes away.
But the police lost the coat and the rest of the potential DNA evidence. Emma then began to get threats from her abusers. Feeling frightened and unsupported, she withdrew her allegations.
I was very confused, and basically I just wanted to go back to my life before and get rid of it all.
It wouldn't be long before her exploiters would draw her back into their world. That year, 2003, the authorities received their second clear warning about the seriousness of what was happening. It came from Dr. Angie Heal. She was employed by South Yorkshire Police to look at drugs crime. In Rotherham, she quickly identified links to sexual exploitation.
It really didn't make any sense as to why there were major police operations that were being launched to investigate these issues.
So she decided to write a report on the problem.
Some police officers for the report gave information about circumstances in which young people were being found, the levels of abuse and violence and rapes that were happening.
Her report was sent to senior police officers in South Yorkshire and Rotherham council managers. She pointed to the lack of convictions and to the police named names.
I mean, I didn't hold back on what I was reporting.
And what actually happened?
I don't think anything happened at that time. And one of the things that kept coming back was, where's your evidence? And I was thinking, isn't that your job to collect evidence?
It was another warning dismissed. But the wider community was also getting worried. For many years, Jim Stevens ran a charity for homeless young people in Rotherham. His staff saw men targeting 16 and 17-year-old girls and boys at hostels. They told the police and the council.
We were getting responses from quite senior people within social services, particularly, and safeguarding, that there wasn't actually a problem in Rotherham at that time of any kind. And whenever we raised the issue of sexual exploitation, we were considered to be unprofessional, alarmist.
However strong the denials, there was no let-up in the abuse. The parents of yet another girl found themselves constantly on the phone to police, reporting her missing.
I really lost count of how many times I would phone them in a week. Just depended. Sometimes probably twice a day.
Only now is their daughter able to describe how the people meant to protect her made her feel.
They try and make you feel ashamed and like it's your fault, that I were just a naughty child and that I'd got bad behaviour.
For 4 years, the family existed on a knife edge.
She went from a normal 13-year-old, reading books, Harry Potter books, stuff like that. She used to love it, into when police were fetching her back, she used to be dressed differently. She looked like she were going out clubbing.
They were taking her away from us and we had to deal with it like, well, no, you're not. You're not having her. We're going to fight back. We're going to keep changing her back. So that they knew there was somebody at the other end not letting them win and have his daughter.
By now, this abuse had been blighting Rotherham for nearly a decade. At the end of 2004, the council finally appeared to be waking up to the problem, and sexual exploitation was discussed at an important meeting.
We invited ourselves, we gate crashed the meeting. It was chaired by the leader of the council. There were lots of heads of department there. There were senior social workers, people from police, from the youth service.
They were given details of how girls were being groomed and exploited in Rotherham. Council leader Roger Stone appeared to some visibly shaken.
He was very angry, he was very shocked. And I remember him saying, we are not having this has got to stop.
We were very, very optimistic after the meeting. For the first time, the statutory sector had seemed to recognise the issue and make a commitment to do something about it.
But little seemed to happen, and finally their patience ran out. More than 30 voluntary organisations wrote a joint letter to the council's then chief executive.
We felt, right, let's go to the top, let the chief exec explain to us why there has been such apparent lack of progress.
What was the response to your letter?
We didn't get a response.
So why did it appear nothing was being done? At another council meeting in 2005, Roger Stone seemed to offer an explanation.
The leader said, "Oh, well, we have to tread carefully on this because we don't want to upset the community." We had been told at the previous meeting that the perpetrators were Asian men. And because of that, and only because of that, I assumed the leader meant the Asian community.
Mr. Stone has told Panorama he can't remember what he said more than a decade ago, but he insists he did take action. Elsewhere, parents were challenging the police.
I said, well, why can't you investigate what's going off now? And all I got after that were, I've told you, we cannot because of racial tension. When it weren't about race, this. This is about what some adults were doing to some children which left us devastated. Because we got nowhere else to turn.
And in 2006, another report from Angie Heal raised the issue. She said some workers in the town feared the abuser's ethnicity was one reason for a lack of police investigations. It was a third detailed warning about Rotherham's problems.
There was issues of ethnicity, and some people felt that ethnicity was a barrier to investigating, that it was seemed to be too sensitive an issue.
If there had been direct engagement with the Pakistani heritage community and not through the conduit of the traditional, I have to say, male domination of the imams in the mosques and elected members in the council, a lot more might have been done much sooner.
Within Rotherham's Pakistani heritage community, there is bewilderment about why that wasn't done.
I think also it was lack of services response to what was going on, turning a blind eye for so long.
And some ask what message the lack of investigations sent.
Abuse is abuse, and you should never ever shy away from pinpointing abuse. In terms of those men that perpetrated against white young girls, they will have been abusing internally within their own communities. And it's about time that we started to recognise and prosecute.
Without prosecutions, new abusers were able to claim new victims, as one mother probably knows better than anyone. Both of Maggie Wilson's daughters were sexually exploited. It began when her eldest, Sarah, was just 11.
She had 2 phones, because there were a pattern with phones. If it rung, it was as if it were a sign to, right, it's time to meet and things like that. We got to a stage where I even had to lock the bedroom windows, but she still get out because there was no lock on the bathroom window.
Again, she was desperately trying to get the police and council to help. Even when Sarah should have been protected in care, the abuse continued. Only later did Maggie discover her youngest daughter, Laura, was also being groomed.
Did you think that she was getting drawn into exploitation in the same way as Sarah had been?
I didn't, no, because she always said that she wouldn't.
Laura was seeing a boy called Ashtiaq Ashgar. When they were both 17, he murdered her, after she revealed her involvement with him and another man to their families.
It's a lonely spot here where Laura was murdered by
An official inquiry found the authorities had known for 4 years that Laura, like her sister, was being groomed. Maggie believes if she'd been given more help when she first asked, things would have been different.
If they'd have listened to me all them years ago, Laura wouldn't be where she is now. She'd be alive.
Finally, in 2010, nearly 15 years after the abuse was identified, Rotherham got its first convictions for sexual exploitation.
These men were involved in the organised sexual abuse of 3 teenage
5 men were jailed for a total of 32 years. It should have been a turning point for the town, but there have been no other major prosecutions since. And still, the grooming and exploitation goes on. Until 2 years ago, this man's daughter was a target.
Sometimes we found her in Park, sometimes we found her in Sheffield.
They'd already had a lot of contact with social workers and felt all the blame was being put at their door.
We're not excellent parents, nobody's excellent parents, but we did as best. What can you do? Apart from ring police and then they say they can't know till something happens. That's all you ever got from them.
He was shocked when he discovered Rotherham Council had known about the men suspected of abusing his daughter since 2007, long before her abuse began.
I was just sifting through it, having a look at basically notes they were sending, and then I saw that, Rotherham safeguarding, and I read it, and I went absolutely ballistic.
Social workers had accidentally left this document in a bundle of other papers.
This is a list of names.
What they were keeping from us.
Did you know any of this?
No, not one bit of it.
And it says here that your daughter and another girl are in contact with two of the males listed here.
Yeah.
Again, down here, it says, these males have also featured in previous strategy meetings held by Safeguarding, dating back to 2007.
So why weren't not done then?
So if they'd acted in 2007...
Yeah. It might not have happened to my daughter.
Instead, she became yet another child in Rotherham to be sexually exploited. The only person in authority to resign for such failure has been the council leader, Roger Stone. Both Rotherham Council and South Yorkshire Police have apologised. They refuse to be interviewed for this programme, but say improvements have been made and they will act on Alexis J's recommendations. Arshid Hussain, who abused Isabel when she was 14, has still not been prosecuted.
I don't understand why my life's been affected and his hasn't, he's just completely got away with it.
Through his solicitor, Arshid Hussain has told us he denies the criminal allegations made against him. There is now a major police investigation into past cases. This is a scandal that has caused shock far beyond this one South Yorkshire town. A warning to all communities.
It's essentially a hidden problem. You need to seek it out and identify it, because the one thing that won't happen is that the individuals will come forward themselves easily and ask for help.
And it is children who live with the consequences when others fail to act.
Being betrayed by the people that you thought were there to protect you, that you genuinely believed would protect you. Can you imagine what that does to a child? That is lifelong damage, and that could have been prevented.